Thank you, John, for joining Shoes in Bitcoin. It's a huge pleasure having you here today with me.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Where are you right now? If it's possible, of course, to receive that question, having in mind the privacy that's mandatory in our environment.
Oh, it's okay. I'm a pretty public person at this point, so I'm currently living in Lisbon in Portugal.
A very nice place, which is, as far as I know, it's adopting very fast compared to the other countries in Europe. Bitcoin is a technology.
It's not too bad. I started a Bitcoin meetup here about a month ago, and so we've been doing some actually 2 months ago. We had a couple meetups here and trying to get things going. Lisbon Bitcoin maximalists, we're called.
Very well, very well. And if it's okay to share with me what are the teams or the companies that are supporting these events from the maximalist world, and then if possible to explain me more about the maximalism thing.
Sure. Well, the event locally in Lisbon, it's just a community event. There's not really anyone sponsoring it. It's just something I organized, using meetup.com to see what kind of presence there is here for people that want to just have a Bitcoin only meetup. So there's no companies involved or anything like that. But the idea here was to usually Bitcoin meetups will call themselves crypto meetups or just Bitcoin meetups, and I wanted to go to the extreme and just say this is the Lisbon Bitcoin maximalists and see what kind of people that attracted and whether or not how that would affect the kind of crypto or shitcoin people that might not attend. And it worked out pretty good. We get about 50 people coming to each event, and I'm pretty happy with it. As far as what Bitcoin maximalism is, well, we just did a whole Synonym spaces with Francis Pouliot from Bull Bitcoin. And we talked about the history of Bitcoin maximalism and a lot of our views on like what it really means. So I would check that out for your listeners if they want to get a lot more detail. But generally, it's just the idea that if you look at how blockchains work as a kind of science or as a technology, you pretty much can understand from primitives that you can't really have forever more than one that actually works well as a tool. And so Bitcoin maximalism just respects, the needs for efficiency in using a system that ultimately doesn't actually scale. And so you need to respect that really everybody should be focusing on using one blockchain, and that most, if not all, really, other blockchains are completely superfluous and unnecessary. And most of them really are just scams and ways to get people to, have attention moved away from Bitcoin and into somebody else's pocket.
Right. Thank you, John, for this clarification. It is very important because I see on Twitter lots of people are arguing on that direction. And when you say shitcoins, you refer to the complete scams and not to the blockchains that are functioning, or you are saying Bitcoin and the rest is shit? I just want.
Well, I am mostly talking about blockchains in general. So in other words, when I say shitcoins, I don't also mean credit or fiat. I think we should be careful what terms we use so we know what we're talking about. But as far as what I am talking about all blockchains. I think there's no need for any other blockchain. And anytime that you see a narrative that somebody is attaching to say why their blockchain makes sense, it's usually ignoring the fact that they can't actually scale that blockchain either. And that if there were any actual success in that blockchain, it would cause the ultimate failure of that blockchain because it's less decentralized, more censorable, less scalable than Bitcoin is. It's just worse because it's more complex typically, or more trusted typically. So I would include as shitcoins, my definition is maybe a little bit wider than most people. I would include literally every blockchain. That includes side chains, one-way chains, space chains, privacy coins, smart contract platforms, anything that uses a blockchain that is not Bitcoin.
The side chains on of Bitcoin, you also refer them.
There's no such thing as a side chain on Bitcoin. That's just a narrative. In other words,
sorry, I'm not so technical as you are. What about Liquid?
Liquid is a blockchain, but it doesn't actually have any relationship with the Bitcoin blockchain. It's just a separate federation of companies that run a blockchain. And what they do is they will allow you to convert your Bitcoin into the native token of their blockchain. And they manually, in a trusted way, enforce this conversion rate where they say if you give them one Bitcoin, they will give you one of their coins. And then they call this coin LBTC. But there's really not really any distinction between this and a shitcoin. The main difference is that a shitcoin tries to pretend to be decentralized, and Liquid doesn't try to pretend to be decentralized. They just say we are a federation of companies and we operate this blockchain. But in the end, there's no atomic connection to the Bitcoin blockchain.
Okay. And that's what you are doing at Synonym. Welcome to the atomic economy. Could you please explain to me, as I'm really new to this, what does it mean, atomic economy? And
sure,
if possible, to explain, because I'm a bit more aware of Liquid, more specifically because I've started recently minting tokens with my digital art, trying to stack some sats in this way and to convert them into not liquid but real sats. So I want really to understand what's the difference, and yeah, maybe I can learn something new.
Sure. So I think your first question is just asking what we mean when we say welcome to the atomic economy. And then your second question, I would say, just to talk a little about maybe about NFTs, because that seems to be where your interest is. So I would say, as far as what Synonym is and what the atomic economy is it's just a concept for explaining that what we're doing as a company is we're trying to actually build a whole ecosystem that is software, protocols, just everything you would need technologically to be able to have a post-hyper Bitcoinized world. So like if Bitcoin really does succeed and become the main store of value for everything on the planet, what does the internet and the economy and the web actually look like? Like if Bitcoin really disrupts big banks and disrupts big tech and disrupts big government, what do we replace those things with in our society? And so we try to basically model this, future and create the technology we think that could replace those things and give people ways to basically coordinate their economy together and have their own way of self-regulating and self-banking, et cetera. And so we make a whole suite of technology and products. We haven't finished most of them yet, but we have released a few to enable this future. So the atomic economy is just this concept of, a social economy that doesn't require these major centralized monopolies to operate. And so basically, we replace, big banks with Bitcoin and Lightning and LSP services like our blockchain service. We replace, big tech with our underlying /tags protocol, which is a new way of doing a peer-to-peer web and establishing peers in /tags so you can have your own reputation systems. And this also leads into how we replace big government, which is having our own way of holding each other accountable and our own way of knowing who to trust and with what. And so this atomic economy is essentially combining the concept of a circular economy where everybody's kind of transacting and minimally converting assets with the concept of a web of trust where everybody is basically subjectively measuring the reputations of the people they interact with.
Right.
So I know that's probably a lot, and we could probably talk about little pieces of that for a long time, but that's the overview of our vision and what we're trying to do. As far as NFTs go, well, you have my opinion on Liquid, and I would say with NFTs, the tricky part is I don't know that you necessarily need a blockchain to do that use case either. The issue is that an NFT is essentially just a key that proves that you have some sort of receipt to some sort of data somewhere. And that isn't actually like a bearer instrument really, because it's more of a receipt or an autograph that kind of shows you have an association with some data in a URL somewhere. And that data isn't actually stored in the Liquid blockchain or in any blockchain. It's stored on a database somewhere on somebody's computer or multiple people's computers, which means that data could disappear, or the definition of that data could change, or even a community could decide to change all those things without your involvement. So you don't really have rights to anything, because the people that hold the data or generate the data are the ones that control the ultimate data in the end. And so a lot of people are saying that, like, you can do a lot of crazy things with NFTs, but really they're mostly just a digital autograph associated with data stored somewhere. And that's the kind of root primitive of what they represent. There's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement about, the sentiment that it might actually be a way to own a digital photo or own a digital, thing. But the problem is, this is mostly related to contract law and related to trademarks and copyrights and things like this. And most NFTs don't include those rights inside of the data. Even then, the data could still be replaced by whoever's hosting it, or deleted by whoever's hosting it. So it becomes very ephemeral and kind of sentimental more than an actual technology, like most things that come out of the shitcoin world. And so you have to be careful. I would say, if you can make money doing it and make money exposing, your work and getting people and capturing the trend, by all means do it. But I think that the buyers of this need to be doing it for the right reasons. In other words, they should be doing it because they want you to be compensated for your work, not because they'll have some kind of future gain from it, that they'll be able to sell it for a higher rate than what they paid for it. Because that part is entirely speculative, and it's not atomic either. It's not actually connected to the data.
Yeah, it's very sad from the other side, because
I'm not trying to break your heart.
no, it's okay. My heart is already broken. Don't worry about it. So, what about your journey in Bitcoin? I have listened to another interview that you've given to Bitcoin magazine, and it was 1 year ago. So you've said that you're already 10 years in Bitcoin. How did this happen actually? Who has introduced you to the technology, or it has happened only via the network?
So a little less than 10 years ago, I think I started in October of 2012. I had heard that people were buying drugs online using Bitcoin. And this was the Silk Road back then. And I thought, how is this possible? How are these people not getting caught? How are these people not getting arrested? And that's how I kind of found Bitcoin, was researching what they were doing to make this possible. So they were using a combination of Bitcoin and the dark web, like torrent or Tor websites, sorry. And they were using this to achieve a certain level of privacy that allowed them to basically, and still today, there are still websites that do it. They eventually all get cracked down on somehow and closed. But Bitcoin did help facilitate, this kind of early use case of proving that it was uncensorable money. And so from there, I was just in the rabbit hole, and I became a full-time Bitcoiner pretty quickly, and pretty obsessed with Bitcoin. And I just became deeper and deeper into Bitcoin every year since, to the point where now I'm CEO at a Bitcoin company, making Bitcoin products and trying to design the future of Bitcoin. So that's the short version, but there was a lot of bumps along the way and a lot of stories along the way. But that's how it started.
Great, sounds great. So everybody has his or her own ups and downs. And since 4 years, I've been introduced 4 years ago into Bitcoin, and I can share mine maybe another time. But let me know. So you have just shared with me that you became relatively fast, full-time, if I got you correctly, into Bitcoin, because this is something I cannot do. I've been trying to do it, and maybe because I'm trying so hard, that's why it's not working. But I really, I've also applied several times at Bitrefeu, and actually I've also applied to other only Bitcoin companies. So this is, I want to explicitly share. So I'm applying to only Bitcoin companies, and I've had success with one startup for a while, and I was supporting them. And this was the only thing I managed to achieve in the Bitcoin only environment. And I'm really curious to know how it's, because, you know, I want to be stuck in sats. And I want to find a way to be working for in this environment, not only buying them via fiat. I know I'm
So
busy.
you're looking for advice as far as being able to be a full-time Bitcoiner, basically.
Right.
So I'll tell you, it took me years, and I think that in a way this is the same thing everybody has to do, which is, yes, I was my full spare time was in Bitcoin immediately, every extra minute I had, but I was running my own company, and I had my own way of, you know, generating my own salary. And so I had a job essentially, and I was just basically using Bitcoin to, you know, for all my savings, I was converting it into Bitcoin. You know, it was not very much, but over the years, it became to be more, and it allowed me more freedom to be able to take more risks. And so after a few years, when Bitcoin went up a little bit, I was able to pay off some debt, and thus able to kind of spend even more time on Bitcoin. And eventually what I did was I made the transition where I just started winding down, basically closing the business, so I could be doing things in Bitcoin full time and find some way to generate income. At first, like most people, I was just trying to be a trader, and that didn't really go very well. Honestly, if I had never traded Bitcoin, I'd have a lot today. And that was all, it's a mistake always. And that's one thing everybody should avoid, unless your career is already being, you know, something in finance, and you have a particular way of, you know, knowing, you know, being educated in how to manage risk, and this is actually your career. I don't think you should pretend it's to be your career and pretend that you're going to, you know, learn how to be a trader just because you found Bitcoin or shitcoins. But the advice for this is the same advice for all things when it comes to your career. You have to figure out what you're skilled at, what you enjoy working at, and find a way to find that need within the industry you're interested in. Like Bitcoin is not like an industry in any special way where it's like harder to get a job here than somewhere else. It's just that here, you know, there's a certain amount of jobs for a certain amount of tasks depending on the demand for them. And so, for example, I don't know too much about you, but I do know that you make artwork. And I would say, so one path for you would be to specialize in making illustrations for marketing teams of Bitcoin companies. Now, I don't know how much work there is in that specifically at Bitcoin companies, but the only way to get like a Bitcoin job is to make Bitcoin code or do things that are specific to Bitcoin. Illustration is not specific to Bitcoin. You don't need to, you could work for any company doing illustration, and anybody, you know, and then stack sats. You know, if your goal is to stack sats, you don't have to work at a Bitcoin company to do it. You could work at any marketing company, etc. So I would focus on what your strengths are and what your experience is, and
Right.
continue to unfold that and grow that, and try to find what makes you happy in your work day to day. Yeah, working in Bitcoin for a Bitcoiner probably would make you generally happier. But you can't go from being an illustrator to being a programmer without a lot of work, and specifically wanting to be a programmer, whether it's Bitcoin or not. And so, and that goes for any career. And so I would just say, focus on what your strengths are, continue to branch out from those strengths towards Bitcoin needs, and try to fill the gap somehow. And it's not going to be something you can do instantly. It has to be something where you figure out that you can keep saving more and more money by increasing your salary more and more, by being more and more valuable to somebody, you know, that needs what you provide.
Right. Thank you, John. Actually, Bitcoin has made me making these illustrations. I bought a tablet and I've started just once I understood about these NFTs and liquids. Before that, I actually, since 2011, I've been working for companies like Google, Amazon, Finnair, Hilton, because such projects are being outsourced in Bulgaria. Their customer support. And I was running big teams of project managers and people supporting such projects. So I was not making any illustrations before, but it turned out that I really enjoy it. I even created my own website. And I don't know maybe in the future I may start doing something like that also
Or
professionally.
maybe you could find a way to do both. You could do illustrations and see how that goes. And maybe you can find a company that needs a little bit of that, but also needs a little bit of project management or whatever else it
Right.
is you specialize
And
in.
by the way, next week on Monday, I'm starting the new job, but again, back at one of these big companies, which name I'm not going to share right now. So I'm going back into a fiat job, but for sure I will keep making my illustrations and keeping an eye and to track on how the things are working for Bitcoin. And I see right now this bear market, most probably I have to wait a little because all the people right now are.
You never know. There are, bitcoinerjobs.com has a lot of jobs that are posting, and there's a lot of Bitcoin companies still hiring. I think the bear market hurts the shitcoin companies more than it hurts the Bitcoin companies. More layoffs and things like this, but there's always opportunities. Actually, we hired a Bulgarian a month ago, just for what it's worth. Mm-hmm.
So we Bulgarians, because we have a very bad and popular story, which is also on BBC with OneCoin, and this big has happened. But I'm happy when I hear that there are Bulgarians who are joining the industry and are maximalists and are being chosen to be supporting such teams.
I lived in Romania for 4 years.
Ah,
I've been to Bulgaria as well.
So I'm from Varna, which is close to Romania, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went to Golden Sands.
Oh, okay, Golden. It's good. It's very beautiful. Exactly near Varna. Cool. So you have shared with me the majority of things I have planned to ask you in general. What about the future of Bitcoin? I'm sure, this is kind of an assumption and it's more based on our wishful thinking for the future, because everybody who is really owning this industry is creating Bitcoin on the world, which is happening very fast, but I'm not sure this is what's going to happen, having in mind that's going on geopolitically, economically, on all the fronts around the world. This is the future for sure, but I don't believe it's going to happen fast. What do you think?
The question is, how fast do I think the future of Bitcoin will happen? I think it will not happen as fast as Bitcoiners want it to. But I do think there will be times, within the next, 10 years where it will seem like it's happening really fast and it will surprise people. I feel like at some point in the next 10 years, we're going to wake up and be like, what the hell just happened? The Bitcoin price went up, doubled overnight or something. I think something like that will happen at some point because it really is the best way to store value. And if people will converge on this more and more, you will start to see bigger and bigger headlines. I mean, we take for granted some of these things like El Salvador adopting Bitcoin and the president of El Salvador tweeting that he's buying Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin he bought. Like 5 years ago, we would have never imagined that. You know what I mean? 10 years ago, it would have been like, no way, that'll never happen. We're taking these things for granted. Bitcoin is always in the news. People are always talking about it. People are always worried about it. People are always excited about it. It's not going away. And there's still only a limit of how many Bitcoin there are. And there's an increasing amount of people that want some. And so I think that it will accelerate at times, but during bear markets, it's hard to see it that way. Bitcoin's at like $19,000 right now. Like people didn't think it would go this low after being at 70,000, but it is. But it will be at 70,000 again, and so that's the way to look at it, is say, I need to stack sats really hard down here because that means I'll have sats that are worth at a 70K rate at some point again.
This is what scares people, because I cannot imagine how it's going to happen. Okay, after 10 years, hopefully I will be still alive. I hope so. But so this volatility, so today is 60K and after several hours, it drops to 20. This is the only, I believe that it's going again to be 2 times more than 60K for sure when, I don't know. nobody knows, but this is the only thing that if the whole world is, let's say, is like El Salvador, we cannot one day being able to buy bread, and the next day we
Well, the problem is that the people have a conflict in in their understanding about Bitcoin. They think that the more people speculate on Bitcoin and the more people treat it as an investment, the more the price will go up. But they realize they have to understand, but they also complain that it's volatile. Well, you can't have, if it's stable, it means not going up either. And so to want it to only go up is just like, it's naive. It's to say, if I want it to only go up, then that means I have to be willing to experience when it goes down, because it's always going to fluctuate. Supply and demand for all things fluctuates. And we just get that the government hides that from us with inflation of dollars, and they try to make it seem like prices stay the same and things like this. But it's all an illusion. Everything is unstable all the time. And so Bitcoin as a store of value is just one use case. We also need Bitcoin to be used within a circular economy. People need to be spending Bitcoin all the time. So until the culture of Bitcoin evolves from everybody wanting to trade it, everybody wanting to leverage it, everybody wanting to invest in it, and then it has to evolve to, people wanting to use it in commerce, people paying their bills in it, people getting paid in their salary in it, people buying their groceries with it, people using it as money. Until that change happens, the price is going to be very, very volatile, because the supply and demand of traders is not predictable and it's not consistent. So like once everybody that right now wants Bitcoin has it, then demand falls, right? Because in the end, you only have so much money per week or per month that you can put into Bitcoin on a consistent level. And that's the amount that needs to increase, is the amount that people put in every day. And the amount that, so you need people selling and buying Bitcoin much more, and it not to be only for investment purposes. It has to be for commerce.
right. So yes, and this is also conflicting with the hodl part, because you say we have to start spending it, and honestly, I've spent some sats, and I'm sad about it. Always when I spend
well, it's like saying, you have to look at it this way: your sats are your savings, and so every time you spend your savings, you should be sad, right? Whether it's fiat or not, because these are your savings, and I assume you're saving for something. You want to buy a house, you want to have kids, whatever it is, you're saving for something. And so when you spend your savings, you are failing at saving, right? And so unless you're actually buying the thing you were saving for. But the only thing to do with money in Bitcoin, the only thing you can do with it is spend it. Like you have to spend it at some point. Ideally, you're spending it when it's worth more than what you paid for it. But a store of value means storing the value so you can spend it later. And so Bitcoin is for spending. That's what it's for. You don't want to save it till you die, right? You have to spend it at some point. And even if that means giving it to your children, you're still spending it on them, And so Bitcoin is for spending, and this idea of hodling forever is nonsense. Like people need to be practical and think about how to plan their finances the same way you did before Bitcoin. You save for something, and then when you can afford the thing, you buy the thing, and you plan your life, you plan your finances.
Yeah, it's like everything maybe. But
if you have to sell Bitcoin when it goes down, then you've invested too much. In other words, you've saved more than you could afford to save, because it's not saving if you have to sell it, right? It's speculating. And so if you get scared and sell the bottom, well, then why? Did you need the money for something? Then you probably put too much money in Bitcoin in the first place because you weren't managing your finances properly.
Right. And you have mentioned several times speculating. So how to make the difference on Twitter, who is speculating and who is real in this world?
On Twitter, I don't know, it's hard. You have to have a good bullshit detector, and you have to like choose who you trust wisely and see who they trust and establish these reputations yourself over time. This is part of what we're trying to help with some of the software we're making and protocols we're making, to make it easier for people to be able to like keep track of who they trust and who the people that they trust, who they trust, and have this kind of trust system between people that they can actually measure in their own way. But for now, all you have is your brain. And, you know, if you want to take notes or make lists, and that's about all you can do. And most people aren't willing to make lists and, you know, keep track. But, you know, the way I do it in Twitter, for example, is I have a system for like when I will mute someone, when I will block someone, when I will unfollow someone, why I will follow someone. And I use this as a basic method of reputation. And so when somebody responds to one of my tweets with something hateful, if I'm following them, I unfollow them. If I see somebody, you know, do something similar or make a lie or act in some way I don't want to be associated with, and I'm not following them, I mute them. If I already have them muted, I block them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just keep escalating until I remove these people from my life. And eventually you end up with a Twitter feed that is pretty useful. And you end up with followers that are pretty, you know, interesting or, you know, cooperative. And so you want people, like people worry about having an echo chamber. And this is nonsense. Like the internet is like constant information coming from everywhere. You could never have so little info that you were never getting new info. Like it's not echo chamber, it's curating. You have to take all the noise and you have to remove the noise to be only the signals that you actually value. And that's what you're doing, is you're curating. You're not making an echo chamber, you're making the internet usable. And so, yeah, as far as who to trust on Twitter and who's just speculating, people talking about the price, people talking about only talking about number go up, people only caring about the number going up, people using very simple memes and not actually explaining themselves, people who only say positive things and never criticize, people who never accept criticism. You know, you need people to be rational and you know, be willing to talk about trade-offs and things like this.
And at the end of the day, everything, it looks like it's about numbers, because some people are saying even some stupid stuff just to receive WhatsApp likes or retweets, or they're just creating the nonsense. This Twitter for me is confusing. I would love at some time, you know, I imagine the future me being without Twitter, without social media, just holding my Bitcoins on my own island. So I think
Why do you have to imagine that? Just do it. I mean, you don't have to use Twitter. Like nobody has to use it. It's not a requirement. If you're trying to like promote yourself or something, it's a useful tool, but you don't have to interact with people. You could just put out information and not read their tweets. You don't have to follow anybody. Like you can use it however you want to use it. Don't let it stress you out. It can be very stressful and very
in
negative.
the beginning it was. Yeah. Really, it was very, because I wasn't using Twitter so active before Bitcoin, and I was really obsessed. I was waking up with Twitter and going to sleep with Twitter. It was absolutely crazy, and it took me lots of time to isolate myself consciously from all this that's happening on Twitter. And it can be quite confusing for new people into Bitcoin following Twitter, because the narratives there are, I'm not sure there are narratives. Everybody
it's a narrative war. Everybody's trying to put ideas out there that they want you to believe and see what you think about their ideas. And then when people think things they don't like, they get angry. But it is a narrative war. It is an idea war, a meme war. And you have to, if you want to interact there, you have to be prepared to enter battle, because everybody's competing there. And if you don't want to compete and you don't want that stress, you should just not interact with people on Twitter and just use it as a publishing platform, like a microblog or something.
Right. Okay, John, thank you. What about you and your projects in the future? What are your plans regarding Bitcoin, and not only, whatever you're willing to share?
Sure. So with the company, we're working really hard right now to finish our mobile app, which is a wallet that supports Bitcoin. And so we'll support Bitcoin, Lightning, and our /tags features, and kind of demonstrating the user experience that we think, you know, mixes these things very well together, and, you know, how we think the best way to do a mobile app or mobile wallet, you know, what it should look like. We will probably be showing that to people in a few months, you know, in the fall. And so there's a lot of conferences then. And so we'll try to present these things at those conferences. But that's the main thing we're focused on as far as the short-term future. We're hiring a couple people, but we've got most of the team filled out and hired for the moment. And then after we release the wallet, we'll kind of, you know, keep modifying that and evolving that. And we'll start working on the next two products that we're building that also use slash tags and kind of decentralized peer-to-peer web stuff.
Great, John. Thank you very much for this conversation. I really appreciate the time that you spent with me today.
That was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.